On today's show, I'm making 10 bold predictions for the New York Mets in 2025.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now, this show is an annual tradition where a couple of days before opening day, I give you 10 bold predictions for the Mets this season. But I want to stress the first part of that, bold. Okay, these are not just predictions on things that I think are absolutely going to happen, and they're modest predictions. This is not me saying, oh, I think Juan Soto is going to be an all-star. That's not a very bold prediction. This guy very well should be an all-star. No, these are predictions that should be a little bit shocking, should be a little bit exaggerated, things that could be extreme that may or may not happen. I went back and I listened to last year's show, and man, I made some pretty bold predictions. I had Pete Alonso hitting 55 home runs last year. I had him finishing top 5 in MVP voting because I was expecting a monster contract year. At the same time, I also had Francisco Lindor as a top 3 finisher in MVP voting. I said the Mets would have 2 guys finish in the top 5, Alonso and Lindor, and I said Lindor would be top 3. That actually happened. I also said that Francisco Lindor would match his career high of FWAR, which is Fangraphs wins above replacement, going back to his 2018 season with Cleveland, where he had a 7.8 FWAR, and he did exactly that. Had a 7.8 FWAR in this season with the Mets last year. I said it was going to be his best year potentially in a Mets uniform, and we'll see. Maybe he can top it, but that prediction was the one that I was most right on. Most of the other ones did not quite come true. I had Francisco Alvarez winning some hardware. I thought he might win a Gold Glove or a Silver Slugger. That didn't happen. I predicted Zach Short was going to stay on the Mets roster the entire season. He was off the roster, I think probably before the end of April. I also had Joey Wendell not making it the entire season, so 1 for 2 on those utility infielders. I had Nimmo and Lindor being all-stars. They should have been, but they didn't. I had Luis Severino getting to 200 strikeouts. So these are meant to be bold again, and that is what brings me to our predictions this year. And the first one is going to be about Brett Baty. So Brett Baty is hot topic on this show, and I spoke about him a bit yesterday with the context of how he had earned his spot in the opening day roster compared to Luis Acuna, who sort of backed into his spot. And I do want to bring up a poll that I was talking about on the show yesterday, where I had polled you, the audience on YouTube, on March 14th and asked who is going to start the most games at second base this year. 44% of the audience on March 14th said Luis Acuna, 30% said Jeff McNeil, 25% said Brett Baty. Polled you all again yesterday. Now 49% of the audience is saying Baty, 26% Acuna, 25% Jeff McNeil, and that is because Brett Baty has had a fantastic spring, and he capped it with one last home run against Marcus Stroman on Monday. Fell behind on a count 0-2, fouled off a really tough pitch in on his hands to extend the at-bat. Then he got a splitter that did not split nearly enough, and Baty put a good swing on it, putting it out to deep right center field. 413 feet was the measured distance on his 4th home run of the spring, capping off a stretch where he went 18 for 51 in 20 spring training games, hitting .353 with 8 walks to 6 strikeouts. He had a .441 on base, 6 doubles, 1 triple, 4 home runs, amounted to a .745 slugging percentage and a 1.186 OPS. Great spring for Brett Baty. But you might say, well, Baty's had good springs before, right? Well, let's look at those 2 springs. 2024, he posted a .767 OPS, hit 3 home runs, but nowhere near the production this year. 2023, heading into his rookie season, he had a 885 OPS as he hit 325 and got a base at a 460 clip, but he only had 2 extra base hits, so not a lot of slug. This has been a complete package for Brett Baty, who has showed the power, the average, the ability to draw more walks than strike out. He's even, at the end of camp, started to flash some leather at second base. So I think Brett Baty is well on his way to becoming a regular for the New York Mets. He is going to have an opportunity at the start of this season to Wally Pip Jeff McNeil, a topic that we discussed a few weeks back. And so I'm feeling really good about Brett Baty this season, which is why he is my first bold prediction. And that prediction about Brett Baty is this: he will finish with the second highest wins above replacement among the Mets infielders. So what I'm saying is, outside of Lindor, Brett Baty will be the second most valuable infielder on the New York Mets based on WAR. Now, we're not talking about overall offensive value. We're talking about the combination of offense, defense, base running. I think Brett Baty is going to put up a bigger WAR total than Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso are the two guys I'm primarily talking about. Jeff McNeil thrown in there as well, because I think his ability to actually be an above average defender, even at second base potentially, but really if he's going to start to eat into Vientos' playing time at third, and maybe you see Vientos DHing some, I think that's going to be a natural progression throughout the season where we see Baty getting some more time at third base, still getting time at second. I just think that he is going to be a guy that's going to end up with a WAR that could approach 4, which would be an unbelievable outcome for Brett Baty. And Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso, your other primary infielders along with Lindor, are just not guys who are going to rack up a ton of WAR based on the defense that they bring to the table. It's going to hold back their WAR instead of boosting it. So that is my bold prediction about Brett Baty, that he finishes second to Lindor in WAR among Mets infielders. And speaking of Mets infielders, I'm not saying that Pete Alonso and Mark Vientos are going to have a bad year. They're still going to produce, particularly in the home run department. My bold prediction for the two of them is that they will lead Major League Baseball in home runs for a corner infield duo. I've talked about that a lot in this show, that the two of them bring so much power to the table. The only duo in baseball right now that I think compares when you're talking about first base and third base is Matt Olson and Austin Riley for the Braves. But I think the Mets have the ability to have two guys who have 40 home run power if everything's right. I think between the two of them, they'll clear 75 home runs, which then leads me into my third bold prediction for the New York Mets, which is that they will lead Major League Baseball in home runs hit as a team. You got Alonso, you got Vientos, you got Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. All 4 of those guys have the ability to clear 30 home runs. And the first 3, Alonso, Vientos, and Soto, they all got the ability to clear 40 home runs. So you look at that grouping, if they just together hit 120, you are well on your way. You look at the last couple of years. Last season, the Yankees led baseball with 237 home runs. In 2023, the Braves hit 307. That is not the norm. The next closest team was the Dodgers with 249. And then the Yankees led the league in 2022 with 254 home runs. So if you get around 250, you have a good shot to lead baseball in home runs. And you have 4 guys atop your lineup that could get you halfway there. That's not even accounting for Brandon Nimmo, who we just saw hit a home run to tie the final spring training game between the Mets and the Yankees. Mets were down 3 runs late. Brandon Nimmo comes up with 2 runners on, hits a no-doubter, a 3-run shot to tie things up. We've seen him continue to improve with his power ability. Last 2 years, hovering right around 25 home runs, but he hasn't quite gotten there yet. I think it was 24 in 2023 and then 23 in 2024. Maybe in 2025 he gets to 25, but he should be good for at least 20. So you add that onto the 120 that I'm expecting at least from Alonso, Vientos, Soto, and Lindor. Now you're getting to 140. If those guys do a little bit better, that's 150 potentially from those 5 hitters. Brett Baty could be good for a 15. Francisco Alvarez, we've seen him hit 25 home runs in a season. So even conservatively, if you look at Nimmo, Alvarez, and Baty and say, oh, there's 50 home runs there, that brings you to 170. And then you got Jesse Winker, Starlin Marte, and Jeff McNeil. Any of them or all of them could hit at least 10. let's call it 31 home runs. You're right there at 200 home runs, which puts you right in line with where you need to be to then get 50 home runs or more from the rest of your team to ultimately lead Major League Baseball. And I haven't even mentioned guys like Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Luis Torrens, Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio could come up at some point, hit some home runs. There's going to be even guys that end up, coming up along the way that aren't big, huge pieces of this team, but, might have to play a role for a little bit. If an outfielder goes down, maybe the Mets sneak Alex Canario through waivers and he comes up and makes an impact. Maybe a Drew Gilbert finds his way up to the show. Maybe Ryan Clifford flies through. You never know, but I just think this is going to be a fantastic home run hitting team and one that will lead Major League Baseball in that department when it's all said and done. We still got 7 more bold predictions, but first, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, and pre-workout and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients is also partnered with 2-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. What I love about Just Ingredients is that it prioritizes wholesome, nourishing ingredients without the artificial junk. You can read the ingredients on the back and you're not going to find a bunch of stuff where you have no idea what it means, what it is. Just Ingredients gives you ingredients to fuel your workouts. I love the strawberry limeade for my pre-workout. You also have the grass-fed whey protein that you can have as your post-workout deliver real results. Visit justingredients.us/Bryce Harper and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off your order. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just some budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building your wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever, as you can track both shared and personal accounts. You can set goals and you can stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our goal was to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. Looks like we're going to end up a little bit short, but I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. And if you are enjoying the content, please like the video, leave a comment. All that stuff helps out the channel. Let's talk about Juan Soto. He comes in here for my number 4 prediction for the season. And that prediction is that Juan Soto will win multiple MVP awards in 2025. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of shots to win an MVP in an MLB season. You have the All-Star game. That's an MVP. You have the actual MVP. You have the NLCS MVP. You have the World Series MVP. So I think that Juan Soto is going to find himself being named an MVP multiple times this year. I could see him as a big storyline going into the All-Star game, hitting a monster home run, and all of a sudden, there you go. He wins that MVP. I could see him being the MVP of the National League. I did a show, if you want to check out, where I talked about Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani and that potential battle for NL MVP. I talked about what it might take for Soto to get there. So I do think there is a roadmap where Soto could be the most valuable player in the National League this year. And if those 2 awards don't come to him, you still have an opportunity to show up big in October. So again, these are bold predictions. My bold prediction is twice in 2025, Juan Soto is handed an MVP trophy. Number 5 for my bold predictions is that the Mets will have 5 All-Stars for the first time since 2006. Back in 2006, they had 6 All-Stars, actually. David Wright, Carlos Beltran, Jose Reyes, Paul LaDuca, Tom Glavine, and Pedro Martinez. Since then, they've had 4 All-Stars on 4 different occasions. The most recent time was in 2022 when Starling Marte was an All-Star along with Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, and Edwin Díaz. In 2016, Noah Syndergaard, Jeurys Familia, Bartolo Colon, and Yoenis Cespedes were all All-Stars. 2009, you had Carlos Beltran, David Wright, Francisco Rodriguez, and Johan Santana. And then 2007, you had David Wright, Jose Reyes, Carlos Beltran, and Billy Wagner. So it has been a long time since the Mets had more than 4 All-Stars. Last couple of years, I mean, outside of the 2022 season, you're typically looking at 2 All-Stars at best, maybe 3. So to get up to 5 would mean the Mets had a great first half. And there are plenty of candidates who could be All-Stars. Juan Soto should be the shoo-in. Francisco Lindor is owed an All-Star the last 2 years where he should have been an All-Star and wasn't, and then went out and completely demolished the guys that made the All-Star game when it came to the final season stats to clearly have been the best shortstop in the National League 2 years running, but not getting that recognition either time. So hopefully voters will rectify that and give Lindor the All-Star nod he not desperately wants, but that he so clearly deserves. Pete Alonso is always a good shot at being an All-Star. He's going to get a lot of votes, especially if the Mets are good. Mark Vientos has an outside shot at it. Brandon Nimmo, will this finally be the year he's an All-Star? Francisco Alvarez, if his return from the injury is not too long into the season, he could certainly be an All-Star. You have Edwin Díaz, who is, potentially going to be one of the top saves guys in the National League. More on that later. I think the Mets have a lot of viable options to be All-Stars this season. But I have another bold prediction about the All-Star game, and that's that one of those 5 All-Stars, it's going to come from the starting rotation, and it's not going to be Kodai Senga. So that is my number 6 bold prediction, that the Mets will have a starting pitcher make the All-Star game, but that starting pitcher will not be Senga. So who would it be? The 2 guys that jump out for me, Clay Holmes and David Peterson. Now, if either of those guys were an All-Star, it would be a remarkable feat for the New York Mets to have gotten that level of production across the first half from one of those guys. David Peterson, I think, is the guy that I feel the best about this year to lead the Mets in innings pitched, but I don't think that's a bold prediction. I think if you go through the process of elimination, he is the favorite to do exactly that, because Kodai Senga, you just don't know how much the Mets are going to push him throughout the season. Clay Holmes at some point could start to slow down just based on the fact that this is his first time really going through the marathon of a season as a starting pitcher. You have Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea that are starting late, so that puts them as outside looking in when it comes to innings pitched and leading the Mets in that department. And then it's Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, and David Peterson. So I love that as a modest prediction, that Peterson's going to lead the Mets in innings pitched, but that he would pitch well enough in the first half to be an All-Star. That is definitely bold. If it's not him, again, Clay Holmes makes a lot of sense as a guy that can sort of shoot out of the gates and be on fire. I think once you get to that midpoint in the season, I would expect that he's going to slow down a little bit. I don't know if I'm fully anticipating Clay Holmes going wire to wire as an impact starting pitcher atop the Mets rotation, but I do think early on he's going to be able to carry this rotation a lot more than any of us would have expected in the first couple months until they get Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas really rolling again. So that is my number 6 prediction. The 7th prediction I have is that 3 Mets relievers are going to finish this season with an ERA under 2.5, which is very tough to do. Daniel Nunez is one of the guys that I really like to do this. Edwin Díaz could always get back to the 2022 levels. Max Kranick is a guy that had a great spring. Seems like he might have earned the job. It's between him and Huascar Brazaban, and the Mets still, I think, are just waiting to see how AJ Minter comes out of this most recent relief appearance that he made on Monday. If tomorrow he shows up, he's good to go. He's not, super fatigued or anything else. His arm it has recovered well. I think he's going to make this team, and that's going to be one of those other two guys. But you're going to see potentially Brazoban and Kranick flipping spots a lot throughout the season. And if one of them has a bunch of good stretches, I could see them finishing the year with that ERA that's sub 2.5. You never know. Maybe Minter has a great season. You don't even know if maybe a Tyler Zuber or a different name that we're not even thinking about right now has a standout year. Last year, when I made my bold predictions, I was talking so much about why I like the Mets bullpen, and I'm referencing guys like Michael Tonkin and Yohan Ramirez, who were only part of the Mets for the early, parts of the season. And I didn't even mention someone like Reed Garrett because he came out of left field. So there could be a reliever that comes out of left field that I'm not even thinking about right now that ends up pitching to that 2.5 ERA or better. But ultimately, this is sort of a prediction that the Mets bullpen is going to be even better than expected. Another reliever prediction, I alluded to this before, Edwin Díaz. My prediction with Edwin Díaz is that he is going to lead Major League Baseball in saves and set the franchise record for the Mets. Jeurys Familia has the record with 51 saves. I think Edwin Díaz is going to top that and have a fantastic season in 2025. But we have two more bold predictions to discuss. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even who's cutting down the nets. Stay in on the action with tournament games happening almost every day. There's always something exciting to bet on, and the FanDuel app is simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. And not only is there college hoops going on right now, you still got the NBA slate and MLB futures. So if you want to look at the Mets odds to win the World Series or the National League East or Juan Soto's odds to win the MVP, you can find all of that over at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and once the season starts, every single time the Mets have a game, you will get the lineup graphic sent to your phone so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, my final two bold predictions for the Mets in 2025. Number 9, Carlos Mendoza will win the NL Manager of the Year. Is that bold? Well, I'll tell you what, it's pretty bold when you look at the odds. He's plus 1,400 to win the award. They have guys like Derek Shelton of the Pirates, Dave Martinez of the Nationals, Bob Melvin of the Giants, teams that don't have as favorable of an outlook as the Mets as, better bets to win the NL Manager of the Year. The odds-on favorite is Terry Francona taking over the Cincinnati Reds. He's plus 400 to win the award. This is, I think, my favorite awards bet that you can place right now, looking at Carlos Mendoza at plus 1,400, because if the Mets have a fantastic season, if they win the National League East, Carlos Mendoza might get some of that voter love. Thought last year he had as good of a shot as anyone to win the award. Obviously, he did not take it home. Maybe this is the year for Carlos Mendoza. My final prediction for the New York Mets, and I believe this is a prediction I have never made going into a season, but here is as bold of a prediction as you can get. If you haven't guessed it yet, I think you might have a little bit of an inkling of what I'm going to say. My biggest, boldest prediction for the 2025 New York Mets is they get the job done and become World Series champions. This is the year. Everything is in place. You just had the great surprise playoff run, right? That's always a good predecessor for more success to come. You look at the Royals. Remember them? Hate to say that, but 2014, they had all that playoff success. 2015, they got the job done. We've seen it in the past. Maybe this is an opportunity for the Mets, similar to the last time they won a World Series. There was that ramp up. There was that build. There was 84, then 85, and 86. They got the job done. This is the Mets' chance to do it before the what would it be? The 40th reunion that's gonna happen, the 40th anniversary of the 1986 Mets. Last chance to do it before it becomes a 40-year World Series drought. This is year 5 of Steve Cohen's original window, where he said he would love for the Mets to win a World Series within the first 3 to 5 years. This is it. This is year 5 of the Steve Cohen era. Year 5 with Francisco Lindor as your starting shortstop of the New York Mets, and Juan Soto with a chip on his shoulder, coming off a World Series appearance, getting that big contract, ready to prove that he earned it, that he deserves it. Pete Alonso, he's going to break the Mets franchise home run record. There's a lot of things that have come together for this season to be a very special one for the New York Mets. And what would be more special than this being the year that they finally got the monkey off their back, finally, once again, become World Series champions? It's not going to be easy. You have as big of a favorite as we've ever seen with the Dodgers over there in the NL West, the defending champions. But also we know that a defending champion has not won the World Series since the Yankees, and what was it, in 99? Yes, 98, 99, 2000. That's the last time that a team has won back-to-back. The Dodgers, as good of a team to bet on doing exactly that. They're absolutely loaded, but you know what? Maybe this is the Mets' year. It's going to be a very tough division with the Braves and the Phillies right there in the mix. You have other really good teams in the National League with the Diamondbacks, the Padres. The Cubs are improved. But the New York Mets have the right owner. They have the right president of baseball operations, and they have a couple of superstars that should put a ton of confidence into the rest of this ball club. And last year, they learned how to win in October. So I think this just might be the year that the New York Mets are able to become World Series champions again. Let's all hope if any of these bold predictions come true, it is that one. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's show. This week, I'm going to do 10 bold predictions for the Mets' top prospects. So I'm going to go through all the names of the farm system and find some guys that I want to make some bold predictions for, guys that might have big seasons and really vault themselves higher up on top prospect lists. So that's going to be a fun show. I imagine that we might get some news on Tuesday with the Mets setting their opening day roster. You never know if there is a waiver claim to be made. Maybe the Mets do grab a right-handed bat to be in their infield instead of Luis Angel Acuna, as it's been rumored they are looking for one. Maybe they're able to pass Alex Canario through waivers and have him start the season in Syracuse, and they don't lose the talented outfielder. We will see if that is if there is enough news to have a news-based show for Wednesday. If not, maybe I'll do the top 10 bold predictions for the Mets farm system a little bit early. And then Thursday, we got opening day where I'll definitely preview that, as well as give you a live stream after the Mets' first game of the season to jump right into the coverage of a game that I'm sure all of us are going to be watching. So as always, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, be part of our texting service, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.